adopting and adapting the methods of private venture funds in support of our charitable mission. So this is really encapsulates it, I guess. But who's Parkinson's UK? So we're, I guess, a mid-sized UK charity. These numbers are average over the last 2 years, but we raise about 38 million pounds a year, almost all from the Parkinson's community, a few grants from Sport England and so on, but mostly from legacies and from marathons and from individual donations. Mid-sized charity. We have about 500 staff. We have about 40,000 members. That's about a quarter of the number of people who have Parkinson's in the UK. But almost all those members are individuals with Parkinson's or family members. We have an annual budget about 38 million. We do lots of things besides research. That's the orange pie. And then in research, we have research grants, a fairly traditional looking program, grants reviewed by peer review panels to academic investigators on all aspects of Parkinson's. We have a very strong patient engagement and comms activity. And then the virtual biotech program is what I'm going to talk about today. That is a bit unusual. There aren't very many charities in the UK, a few in the US that operate in this way. How do I go down? There we go. So what exactly is that virtual biotech? So it is our main program to create new treatments. If an academic or a company comes to us wanting funding to create a new treatment where they actually have a specific idea of a specific new medication they want to work on, and then it comes into our virtual biotech program. Evergreen seed venture fund, right? So this means we don't have an end, we just keep investing and putting more money in every year. And at some point, there may be some returns. We use a very flexible funding model. We will fund companies, in some cases universities, and we'll use different instruments to fund different kinds of projects with different sponsors. We want to help them succeed and use a funding mechanism that helps them. Typically, these are on the order of £1 million per year, whether it's preclinical or early clinical. Typically, it's about £1 million per year per project. So that gives you an idea of how much, at least in our case, we feel we would have to have available to make this successful. Fair share of financial returns means that absolutely we choose projects based on benefit to people with Parkinson's. That's the only criterion. Of course, that includes feasibility, though. If a project is a great scientific idea and has no possibility of getting investment or whatever, then that doesn't count as potential benefit. Once we've identified those projects, though, then we use mechanisms that would give the Parkinson's community, through us, a fair share of any financial returns if a drug does result. So it could be different forms. It could be shares in the company. It could be milestone payments. But the idea is we're not giving money to companies. We're giving them access to funds. They have to put those funds to work to try to create new treatments for Parkinson's. And if they're successful, then we actually get paid back. We'll support anything from early drug discovery, so screening of libraries, for instance, through to clinical trials. It will be rare that we could afford a phase 3 trial, but if you define phase 3 as the last trial before registration that proves efficacy, then we do have one of those we've supported with a generic repurposing approach. Up to now, over about 8 years, we've committed about £30 million in funding, about over 16 projects. I'll say more about those later. And so that gives you, an idea of the size and scale. We have been running for a while. We've learned a few things. Some things worked well, some things didn't. But basically, as we said, we try to use the methods and people from the private sector. So I was in pharma and biotech for 15 years before joining here. We have a small internal team. I think everyone in that team, it's only 7 people, but they all worked in biotech or pharma companies before. So we're putting those ideas, those people to work, but we're doing it, we're doing it, linking it with the priorities and with the funding from the community. So we're putting them to work for the Parkinson's community. And so why are we doing it this way? I certainly always say I don't think this is necessarily the best or the only way to do this, but we do, think this can work. We think it's a good idea for us anyway. The logic is laid out here. first, we are a patient organization, and what patients want most are those new treatments that have a major impact, not minor fiddling around the edges of reformulation from 3 times a day to 2 times a day, but something that really changes their life with Parkinson's. So that's what we need. That's what they want us to deliver. But point 2, this is a very expensive business, and we're not big enough, certainly, to fund one or many of those, and there are many that are needed in Parkinson's, hundreds of millions. However, pharma companies and venture capital investors do have that much money. They're deploying billions every year on Parkinson's drug discovery and development. That's happening right now. And there's billions more they could invest. But they all are working on, they don't have a focus on Parkinson's. All of those investors and pharma companies could invest in any project. So they really need a compelling project that is more attractive to them than the ones from the other indications for them to make the commitment to Parkinson's. So, so we believe that not only big pharma and VCs, but also smaller investors will invest in Parkinson's projects. It's not hopeless. And it's same thing is true for rare diseases. As you know, there are investors, there are companies, there are projects who are interested only in rare diseases. So even if your condition has relatively small numbers, still there are investors and there are pharma companies who are willing to put hundreds of millions into it, but they need the compelling opportunity that's competitive with others they're presented with. And we know there are early stage projects, very promising with good scientists and good ideas that are just too early to get the investment from these biotech investors or for pharma companies to license from them. I said earlier that £1 million a year, maybe that is that's a nice amount for a company. It's on the low end for a biotech company to make progress, but it's much less than that, and they wouldn't be competitive. So these companies need significant amount of money, maybe a couple of million over a couple of years. But if they get it, in many cases, that can make the difference between just an idea and to actually a project that has data, has IP, has patents, has a team, and can attract that further 100 million that's required to move it into the clinic and to patients. So with that logic, we see that in point 4 there is a role for us in point 4, or point 4 and 5, I guess. So we can bridge that gap, the valley of death, whatever you want to call it. We can find those early stage opportunities that are often in companies and work in that ecosystem, work with other investors, work with the companies to create opportunities for new Parkinson's drugs. This is a depiction of our portfolio. So I won't go through it in detail, of course, but you see that starting 2017, we started adding one project and another, then another, and have built up to the point now we have about a dozen. There are some projects which are missing from here, ones that we funded for a year or two and decided that they were not going to succeed and should be taken out of the portfolio. So that's part of the rationale here as well. No one's smart enough to choose the one winner and just do it. It would be done already if that was possible. So like a VC fund, like a pharma company, we need to have a portfolio, and the portfolio will succeed. Several of these will succeed to make new drugs, but many of them won't. And some of these you see will run out of funding this year or next year, and that's normal. Companies like this are almost constantly every year thinking about the next fundraise. They don't want to raise money for 10 years at a time for reasons that are more financial than anything else. So this is quite a typical portfolio. And you'll see some are clinical trials, the cyan arrows. The bluer ones are preclinical projects. So we have about 50-50 clinical stage and preclinical. We find we can run small phase 2 trials in Parkinson's for about £1 million a year, say two years for 2 million, 2 to 3 million. And similarly, the preclinical projects. In some of these, we're the sole investor. The project simply wouldn't be where it was, wouldn't exist if we hadn't stepped forward to fund it. In some cases, about a third of these projects, we have co-investors, could be other charities, could be private VC investors. We like that. That really validates that we're not completely on the wrong track, that we're finding projects that other people could well invest in, especially at later stages. So this is kind of a messy slide, but it just shows the kinds of partners we have. On the left is our internal team, only a handful of people. Sorry, there are some new faces aren't on the slide, quite a few actually, but it's seven. The team is seven now. Then the next group is the projects that we've invested in, the universities and the companies, some of them at least, we've provided funding to. Middle is quite important. For this drug discovery and development business, it won't succeed unless pharma companies buy into that project later. And pharma companies, when they need to have extra medicinal chemistry or extra animal testing to do, they go to companies like Pharmaron and Signature and DomainX. They don't go to the professor down the hall, the buddy, they have coffee with. So we think it's very important that the projects we fund, we give them enough money that they can go to these very high quality professional CROs manned by the kind of chemists and biologists that work in industry that generate high quality study reports that will support the company finding investment in the future. It's not so, so that makes it a little more expensive, but we think it contributes to the quality and the ultimate success of the companies. We're fortunate we have a number of great advisors from the biotech and pharma business who really think what we're doing is quite interesting. They work for us pro bono on either advisory panels, and we have essentially an investment committee, not shown here, pro bono, people who have worked their entire careers in the biotech and pharma business. We use the same lawyers. They work for us in the morning and they work for Pfizer and Glaxo in the afternoon. The expertise is out there, it's available. UK is a great place to work in this way. There's a really great ecosystem of advisors, consultants, small companies who really know the business. And incidentally, sorry to say this, the salaries are less than continental Europe and North America, certainly for the same level of talent. So it's a relatively, good sweet spot for working in this way. And then on the right, the charities we work with. So Parkinson's Foundation is a US Parkinson's patient organization, very similar to us in size and philosophy. We're very excited that they know our program, and they decided a couple of years ago they would join our program as a strategic partner. They essentially raise money. We call it a joint program. They can tell their supporters that they're supporting a global initiative to create new treatments using this biotech approach. They're partners with us. We're in fact the operating partner. We have the meetings, we have the panels, and we agree to share with that charity any returns we do get. If we do get returns someday, we share them pro rata with Parkinson's Foundation. We think there's a lot of room for more agreements like that, where other Parkinson's organizations and perhaps some other organizations join us and benefit from the infrastructure we've set up, and benefit maybe someday from the financial returns, and just have one more string in their bow for finding new treatments, and actually for talking to investors and supporters as well, because a lot of our supporters really, the high net worth, business-minded supporters of the charity, really like the virtual biotech program. They find it's a different approach, different from what a lot of charities do. And a lot of people say, yeah, we'll give you £100,000 for the virtual biotech program. That's the one we want to support. So I think it helps the other charities as well. Couple slides here just to give you a real case study of how it actually works in one case. Of course, I've chosen a success story. Surprise, surprise. But XYZ Therapeutics there, founded by 3 scientists in the UK, all with good experience in biotech and pharma. They had an idea that was quite interesting. We saw the potential. There were some difficulties, and especially they had basically no intellectual property, no proprietary molecules, no data. They just had a good idea, and they were pretty sure they knew how to do it. We thought about it a lot. We reviewed it with our independent drug discovery panel, decided to move ahead, and gave them their first £1 million as a seed investment, for which we received a significant number of shares in the company. They proceeded to spend that money, as we hoped they would, and the project was going well, and we actually agreed in 2 subsequent rounds to give them further funding, getting the funding up to about $2.5 million over a couple of years. And then it was time for getting very serious. They needed more funds to proceed, and that was their Series A investment round. They were a little early, a little small, and were having trouble with that round. In the end, we introduced them to a VC fund that I'd worked with before, actually, in a previous life. And that connection turned out to be quite influential, I think. And eventually that VC agreed to put 14 million pounds into the company on the condition that Parkinson's UK continued to support them as a co-investor. So we created around, oh, sorry, with our first 16 million pounds altogether, we as part of it. The company also received 2.7 million in Innovate UK funding. They would never have gotten that without the boost, without the start we'd give them through our series, through our seed investment. So now the company is doing well. They're hiring people, still staying very lean though. Pardon me. Making very good progress. They've discovered a novel target. They've got great looking molecules, and they're hoping to raise more money and have further success about a year from now. But basically, it's going as well as could be expected. That's exactly what we want to see, right? We want to identify the project that has potential but needs us, and with our support, they can move forward, get further funding, and then it might be next year, it might be in 5 years. If they continue to be successful, there could be some financial returns to the charity, probably at a multiple of the amount we put in. But it's very speculative to think about what those numbers could be. But the potential is there. So that's one of our projects. We have others we'd like to see go the same direction. Others that have definitely taken the wrong turn and they've been terminated. That's what the portfolio is. So growth of our program, we started setting it up. I won't spend too much time on this. We're now into the 2023 and beyond. We've got the portfolio up. We're realizing, some projects are being cut. Sometimes we're bringing in more funding through partnerships. Now we have to keep it going. Maybe we'll have some income to the charity someday, and maybe this will lead to treatments that are actually in use with people with Parkinson's. Through the clinical trials, we hope that will happen, sooner rather than later. So I think this is the last slide, almost. Some points that might be interesting for discussion are that certainly this is a different approach for most charities, more so in the UK, perhaps in the US. There's a bit of a different culture, of course, in the biotech and financial investment community from the charity side. And you see that we've made the decision to attract people from the biotech and pharma business in. That's not been as difficult as I thought it would be, at least for some specialties. We've gotten some great people who have a lot of experience, and often they're saying, well, I have 5 years to retirement, and I could get another job in another biotech company like I did for the last 30 years, or this charity thing seems really cool, I'll work with them. So we can get those different types of people. There are lots around in the UK. It's an interesting question of, how big or how small this should be, and could it succeed if you had significantly less funding? We could discuss that. The partnerships I mentioned, very important. We can imagine right now it's $1 million a year we're getting from that one US foundation. There are others we keep trying and knocking on the doors, some other foundations, trying to persuade them to do the same thing. Maybe someday we'll succeed. I think there is a lot of potential for collaboration on a model like this. I mentioned the supporters' views, mentioned the positive ones. On our board and in our supporter community, there are some people who make comments like, why are we helping companies? Why are we giving money to companies? Aren't companies the ones who are making money because we're sick? Aren't companies the ones who don't want us to get well because they can keep selling us drugs? So there is a bit of that idea around. And we're quite forthright in answering that. For one thing, the charity does so many things. People can support other aspects of the charity's work if they don't like the virtual biotech program. But when they understand the program, usually they can see, okay, it's really focused on making new treatments. We're not giving money, we're lending or renting them the money, if you like. Most people see the value of this. But it wasn't easy to get the thing started. The charities board and ELT, our executive leadership team, and the chair, board of trustees and charity lawyers. Lots of people had to be persuaded. Our scientific advisory board, most charities have a scientific advisory board that's made up of the same professors they've been funding for the last 20 years. If you ask them, should you give a significant chunk of your research budget to a biotech investment scheme? Surprise, surprise, they will say, "Ooh, I'm not sure it's a really good idea." So we we had to re-engineer our scientific advisory board. Yeah, so those are the remarks I wanted to make. Some of you may have heard some of this before. Hopefully some of you disagree with some of it, so we can have some good discussion. But I'll stop sharing now and let Jane and Sonia guide us.